And board and senior staff have received a final report from the facilitator who had been working with us for whatever it was, 8 or 10 months. And Sherry and I will be working together on the public release of that report, and we will let you know when that's ready. Thank you. So do we have a presentation this evening?
We do, Madam Chair, and actually it's me. We had a couple of other contenders, and you look like you've got your B team tonight. It was a long weekend and moving into Tuesday, and someone knew it was a hockey game, I'm sure. That we had, unfortunately. So we've got 2 other speakers to come for the June, or at least one of them for the June. But what I wanted to do was just update you in terms of where we are in our thinking around 21st century learning. Some of you will be aware that both the board chair and Trustee McDonald were involved with myself and Sheila Shanahan at 2 days worth of meetings called by the province, by the Ministry of Ed, in Vancouver on Thursday and Friday. They were sort of the same topic, 21st century learning, or whatever the ministry wants to call it, from different perspectives. The first one was around HR and labor practices, and then the second part of that was some feedback from trustees themselves. So there were trustees from all over the province, superintendents from all over the province, around what it could look like as we move into the new 21st century learning path, and what are some of the structures that would need to be in place in order for that to happen. So we spent 2 days in Vancouver with about 300 people talking about 21st century learning, and I thought I would just give a quick update of a PowerPoint that I have been using as I talk to various groups in the community. I've been in front of service groups and over in schools and working in the community at various levels, trying to just engage people in a conversation about the new direction. So this is all new for me, so let's try this. Sheila?
Alan could help you.
Alan's a whiz! Sheila says, press it on the right.
Let me try.
Other right. Other right. The other right. I have no karma when it comes to technology, so if you want it not to work, just hand it to me.
It is not you.
That's how
it is the technology.
It is the technology. Look at Captain Technology over there.
Just a second. Just a minute.
The abuse he takes for helping.
He does.
Give that a try now. Are you sure that has that been sitting off of the might not be charged?
That's the problem.
So can we hand click it?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm ready to go to the next topic.
Now, please.
Oh. How's that?
So when I began talking to you about 21st century learning, we started from the position that we really didn't want a set of rules and a framework from the ministry, and we don't want that either. And clearly the ministry has gotten that message. What we have gotten to is a place where across the province we're talking about the kinds of, and in fact we're not even talking about skills anymore, we're talking about competencies. And the shift from expecting students to have skills as opposed to competencies. And it isn't just semantics. It's the difference between about learning a process as opposed to a product, or having the ability to do something that leads to a product, but you could apply in a wide variety of ways, and the product at the very end could be different. So it is a shift between having a whole list of skills that a student must have to a much smaller list, but a much deeper list, if you would go with me to that place of competencies. So what we're talking about now is that we need to be able to have a variety of ways for students to demonstrate what they know, what they're doing, and how they're being. And they're being in terms of how they're interacting with knowledge. That we need to have experiences that scaffold information for students and experiences. And so that's where you might, for example, move to a more project-based learning, interdisciplinary-based inquiry. So for example, if we got to a place where a group of grade 6 students were learning the laws of motion, as we saw just recently at Airport, which was the most amazing thing I've seen in a very long time, an amazing teacher at Airport who challenged herself as a teacher to say, I'd like to use fine arts, drama, art, sculpture, music, whatever, the fine arts, more often in my classroom, not just to teach fine arts. I want to find a way to weave fine arts into my students' way of learning. And she used a science unit that she designed, and her class learned Newton's laws of motion through the opera, The Magic Flute. And it was the kids showcased it for us. It was the most amazing thing I have seen in a very long time. Those students, not only did they understand the laws of motion, did they build trebuchets and all kinds of things that demonstrated their science knowledge. They knew the words to the opera, they could sing it, they designed the costumes, they performed the opera for their student body in their school. And every one of them, you should have seen the fire in their eyes when they were telling us about this. And they will never forget Newton's laws of motion. And they'll never, ever forget the magic flute and their appreciation of what that was as an opera. So that's what an interdisciplinary-based inquiry is. Can we use fine arts, this teacher challenged herself with, to teach math or to teach science, to teach something that is out of the norm? And in that experiential concept, the ability to learn by doing, will that embed an imprint in our students longer and deeper so that they know about the process, they know more than the product, they know what the process was of their learning, and they can recall it. So it's about how the brain imprints. And what we know about research is that if a student is connecting intellectual stimulation, like learning about something, with kinesthetic, where they're moving, touching, experiencing, building, collaborating, producing something, the brain imprints that differently, and it hangs on to it differently, it hangs on to it longer, and it stores it on a shelf that it can access fairly readily. And it stays with them for a long time, and it allows them to, what we call in smart learning, connect with prior knowledge. So that's a shift already. So even though it's only been 7 months since I was last started this conversation with you, we now have a much better understanding, and we have a deeper understanding about what we would need to do to develop competencies in our students, which will lead them to 21st century employment and participation, as opposed to just a series of products, exams they need to write, or a list of skill sets they need to acquire. So I'll move on from there, please. So again, this is about strong disciplinary knowledge, deep as opposed to breadth. So not 201 things, but maybe 30 things really deep and really complex that they can apply to a variety of different media and different ways of learning and different subject areas. That they need to, that part of what we will work with them is to demonstrate that they can express their ideas and thoughts verbally, because that's always important. Literacy is a critical piece of 21st century learning, and in writing using a variety of media. Because what we know, and I said this on Denman Island last week, is that all the research we have about our children's future tells them that no matter what passion pathway they choose, and even if they know it from the time they leave high school, which is rare, but some do, and if we've done our job, maybe they more do now, that no matter what area of passion they choose, they will change their job-related experiences or their jobs 7 to 11 times in their working life in the future. So that's not the reality we saw. When we were going to school, we went to university if we wanted to get into a career that needed university, or we went into trades because we were good with that particular skill set. And we didn't really expect our jobs to change very much. We thought that once I became a teacher, I was going to be a teacher, and then I might want to go off on a slightly different pathway. But the world of research that talks about the 21st and 22nd century is that they will, within their own fields, need to shift 7 to 11 times. It may be that they are still electrical engineers or plumbers, but it wouldn't be that they would need to completely change their job, but how they do their job will change. And what they need is not to necessarily know the skill, they need to know how to learn a new one. And their employer is saying to us now that what they want are employees who can take knowledge, internalize it, use it, and then 5 years down the road when the technology has changed, use new technology in a different way, still as a plumber or an engineer. So it's talking then about their ability to shift. And that's not about skill set, that's about competency and capacity. So we're needing to increase their capacity as they can manage their way through changes in their employment in the future. Alan, can you change this? I'm not going to read these all. So what that speaks to is the need, and this is the one that excites us the most, truly, and particularly in the Valley it really excites us because we see this happening all the time in our schools. And finally there's a recognition on the part of whoever makes, if there are rules at the ministry, that it is the social thinking piece. The piece that we have never really had a rubric or a final exam to measure. And that's that piece around being a respectful, empathetic, ethical human being. That there might not necessarily have been a multiple choice test that you could measure that by, but we've always been able to give our students those kind of citizenship, global awareness experiences, but we had a hard time finding a curriculum for that to fit in. We were almost trying to do it and then find the place to give them the marks for it and the credit for it. huge big part of 21st century learning will be about social thinking. And in fact, we're saying to our elementary colleagues, it's absolutely critical that the social thinking pillar, along with numeracy and two forms of literacy, the reading and writing, so numeracy, reading, writing, and social thinking. The social thinking is the fourth pillar that they need to start to build for us as those kids get into secondary, as they begin to really specialize. Because if they start for us in elementary, embedding that self-responsibility, self-regulation, a student's ability to be open to being connected to the world, having some ethical responsibility about looking outside of your own world into society and contributing. If they can start that for us at elementary, then as we get them in grade 8 through 12, or whatever those things are called when we get there, then as they have more choices, they'll be able to funnel themselves into the pathways that make the most sense for them. So as we're talking about this will be things that are now expected curriculum. And that's exciting for us, because in this district we've honored that for a very long time. I think there is a real social conscience in this district that doesn't always exist in other school districts, and I think the Valley actually not just cultivates it, nurtures it, but embraces it. So this excites us about the new 21st century curriculum.
Sherry?
Yeah.
How long is the presentation?
Just about done.
Okay.
Just about done. This is my last slide. So as we move ahead, what we know now is so different than what we knew when we first started. And what I have said in some of my talks is that if we were to ignore the brain-based learning material that we have uncovered in the last 5 years, it would be such a tragedy. Because we have in education been inundated in many ways with brain-based learning, and most of us have embraced it because it's just so fascinating to you as an educator to really know the science of how the brain learns and works. But if we embrace it now, or if we chose not to, but to ignore it, we would miss a serious component on how kids are going to learn in the future. And it would help us understand how we can use technology, how we can use interactive learning, how we can use multi-age group learning, how we can use project-based learning to really maximize students' learning potentials, because we now understand that learning is an active process, that motivation is the key, that our benchmarks for success might not necessarily be our students, and we need to listen to that and respond, that learners bring different knowledge to every new learning challenge, and we have to start them from different places. If we start them from the same place, we're always going to have someone starting from a deficit position, and we're always going to have somebody who's not engaged because they were already there already. So we're going to have to reshape where our benchmarks of where students start and where they end. And in that journey, we need to honor the progress that they make individually as opposed to a whole group. So I'll leave that with you for now. That's the 5-minute, 10-minute update on 21st century learning. It's an exciting time to be in education, and it's an exciting time to be in the Valley. Through your generosity and the funding that you've given us, we have got some people who are being called away to the provincial table to showcase their stuff, and it's because they've had the time and the resources from the school district to do that. So thank you. That's where we are.
Thank you. And we have had you called away to be in the provincial showcase. You were one of 4 people in the province that was on a panel. I think it was a panel of experts to talk about 21st century learning, or as we call it here, learning today for tomorrow's world. And it was proud for us to have you speaking there.
I think I was only there because I was the stirrer-upper. They needed one stirrer-upper on the panel, and that was probably why I was there. I was pretty embarrassed because I got really red, but it was lots of fun and we learned lots. It was good.
So thanks for continuing to educate the board and the public on what's happening with regards to this initiative, and we look forward to having more reports in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to old business now. Policy 5100R1, hiring of excluded staff.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's one of these policies that's been around longer than I have, actually, in terms of even being in the Valley, and it needs a loop to be closed. It needs to be closed off, which is why it's here before you. Before my time, just as I arrived, actually, so that would be almost 3 years ago, this policy came out of the DELAP. It was one of my first DELAP meetings. I remember it being discussed there. And it was discussed at great length at DELAP, which was the former policy committee structure. And it went out to the field within about 3 months, and there was no feedback. And then I found some notes just the other day that it came back to DELAP with no feedback, and then there was a decision to send it back out because there was a sense that perhaps it didn't go to the right people in the field. So with Linda Nygaard, I remember helping getting it back out to the field. It went back to the field and then came back to a different, there was no JLAP anymore, no structure, and it sort of sat there. The only feedback that I'm aware of, and I was the collector with Linda of the feedback, the only official feedback came from one partner group. It went out to DPAC, ESPA, CDTA, CUPE, who else would it have gone out to? There was an Aboriginal Education Council member on the policy committee at the time, and she brought back her verbal feedback at the time. So I'm only aware of one formal piece of feedback, and that came from the Principal Vice Principal Association, who gave us feedback at the time. Since then, it has sat out in policy land and needed to come back to the board. In my briefing note, I have noted for you that the feedback came from the partner group, said that they would recommend that the policy be amended to include the hiring of the assistant superintendent, because as the policy reads right now, it was to be from the superintendent would hire everyone below. And so that was the one piece of feedback that came back from the field 2 years ago. And then since then, because this came from me, is my note that discussion with various trustees over the past 5 or 6 months has demonstrated that there's an interest on the part of some trustees to amend the policy to include the hiring of directors and the assistant superintendent. And I would suggest that you discuss that tonight and determine if you could give us some direction about where you'd like this policy to end, either as if you consider it as it's been written, or if you'd like to make amendments to it.
Okay, so I guess I'll start the discussion. I guess from my perspective, this has been around for a while. I think it was Janice Proudfoot actually that put it forward at a board meeting in June of 2007. And it has been kicked around. So what happens is, for the public, the board keeps an action list, so we don't lose track of items that have come before the board and we're expecting something to happen. So it's been sitting there since 2007 with bits and pieces of work done on it, and I think it's probably time that we dispensed with it, and so I'm glad that it is on the agenda for this evening. I guess I've said this before, I think it was in March when it was before the board, is that I'm not sure when this policy was written, so we don't have a policy on the books. Again, if this is a draft policy, it's maybe written 3-4 years ago. This doesn't reflect the process that I'm familiar with, having been on the board for 2 years entirely. I think it mostly does, but on a responsibility for hiring, my impression and our practice has been that the board is directly responsible for the selection of the superintendent of schools, the secretary-treasurer, assistant superintendent, and directors. And I think that the rest of the policy does look like our process, where the superintendent and the secretary-treasurer would oversee the processes, and of course Linda Marie has always been very fundamental in those things, where she has arranged for the pods and shortlisting and whatnot. And I think that our existing process works well. So from my perspective, I wondered if we could pass this policy with just a little addition there in 1.1. Was the feedback that I had on this. So I don't know if other trustees have feedback on this as well. Janice?
I'm okay with it, but I have a question with respect to provincial. Is this in line with what other districts are doing? Is this the general norm, how other districts proceed, is that superintendent and secretary treasurer is the board's responsibility, and the superintendent goes under there? So that's my thing is.
I have done some research when this actually came out, back to me last year. I can't remember how it did. And I think that it's probably 60-40. I would say that some districts have moved away from this and have moved directly to the superintendent is hired by the school board, the Board of Education, then everyone below them is the superintendent's responsibility for hiring. And then other districts mirror more what the amendment is, which is around assistant superintendents and directors. So I would say it's about a 60-40 split. You will find districts that have language that they consider to be older language that they're quite comfortable with, which is the assistant superintendent and directors. And some have moved away to the superintendent and most of them, superintendent, assistant superintendent, and secretary treasurer, for sure, are usually hired by the board. And then the shift is more about who hires below the assistant superintendent. And I would say it's almost 60-40, 50-50 when you look.
And in those districts, who hires principals? And then our
superintendents, usually.
Okay, so that's different than Sheila, and then Danny.
So, first of all, was this although it's been floating around for a while, but it is sort of appearing, it came out on Friday and it's a long weekend, we haven't had a discussion and Tom is not here. So I would be reluctant to receive a motion in either way and vote on it at this meeting. I think that we would be prudent to have our discussion and then bring it back at another date. The next point, I would be speaking against adding the assistant superintendent and the directors. I would be adamantly against adding the directors. I do believe that our employee primarily is the superintendent of schools. I understand because of the School Act that the secretary-treasurer is also included there. And I would be willing to give consideration to the assistant superintendent's role because that is often due to the, you're planning for succession, but that role ultimately is often the step-up superintendent. Although even there, you still would, usually look at having a hiring if there were any concerns about whether that person was qualified. And I think that our role is adequately addressed in Section 2 under consultation. But especially when, I'm open to being convinced about the assistant superintendent, but when it comes to the director's level, they are the employees of the superintendent. I believe that that's appropriate, and I just think that we should not go to a practice of adding them into that, and that it muddies communication, it muddies accountability. Our employee, the person that we get our main reporting from should be the superintendent and secretary-treasurer only. I don't see any advantage to add the suggested amendment.
Danny?
Well, old habits are hard to break. I guess for me, the board actually does the hiring of new principals and administrative officers to the district. And I consider the fact that directors and above are somewhat elevated from that position, so I would see that should be also selected by the board. So I'm not in favor of the 1.2 under this policy, and it has never been our practice. So, I know there's been concerns in the past, even about shuffling principals around with some of at least one of our previous superintendents, where there was a concern by the principals and vice principals that if you said the wrong thing, your career ended basically where you're at. So I still think the board needs to be involved.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? When I read this policy, when I read 1.2, my understanding was that the selection process was different than making the selection. And I looked for some clarification in this policy. Just because the board doesn't manage the selection process would not preclude the board from making the actual selection. Because now our practice is, I don't know, maybe Linda Marie is really the person that manages the selection process under the direction of Sherry. But
You're right, it does speak to management of the selection process, and I can't speak because I didn't write this. This was the draft, right, that came from the previous superintendent. But I would read that as he specifically, he wrote the management of the selection process, which would really be, with him asking the HR director to manage the process.
yeah.
But I also expect if you read it in the entirety, I would expect, however, that would not make any sense if you didn't accept that the board is directly responsible for the selection of the superintendent of schools and secretary-treasurer. I think that it was written, whether or not that's what you agree with, that it would be that the actual hiring process of excluded staff would be directed to him or her. That's what it says.
So you're reading when it says process, it includes
Means
making
including the
selection.
selection. I would believe it reads like that.
Okay, Corinne?
Just to clarify, we're not adding anything to this. This is our present practice, is that we hire the superintendent, we hire the directors. We're already doing that. It's not that we're adding that to it. And I personally really like that, and I've sat on an awful lot of hiring committees, and I think it's it's a really interesting process, and I think the value there for us is that, and this is no slight on present staff by any means, but there is this fear of empire building if it's left to one person. I don't think you would ever do that, Sherry, let's just be perfectly clear, but I'm thinking long-term now. And I like the checks and balances that involving the trustees. I think it's a very valuable process. I like the input that we get from all the partner groups. And sometimes we listen and sometimes we don't, but they do bring a different perspective to the table. And so for me, I think it is important that, we are involved in the hiring of the principals and vice principals, and that we should continue on as we have been doing with the hiring of the assistant superintendents and directors as well.
Can I just ask the chair through the chair some clarification? So I don't think that, as I say, this didn't exist before. It's a draft that was written, I think, as a change to what is currently our present practice. But none of that precludes participation in the process itself. This really is meant to speak to who makes the final decision. So whatever the final decision is, it would be that I don't believe there was any intent for the process, including partner groups and all of that, would change. I think Linda Marie has demonstrated that this is an incredibly rich process, better than anything I've ever seen, and that whoever are the decision makers at the end, it wouldn't preclude that the process would be the very valid process that we have. I don't think that was the intention at all, because I remember asking that question about that. Linda Marie.
I just want to offer a clarification, because I know this had been run by me before it went out, and I think the reason why it was written that way in terms of process is that historically, when it comes to hiring a secretary-treasurer, like Glenn was hired following our usual process, but in terms of the superintendent, sometimes it's been contracted out, and then it was managed by the secretary-treasurer for the superintendent, like when Jordan was hired. It was contracted out, and it was not part of our usual process. So I think it was written in terms of sometimes we contracted out, sometimes we go by our usual process, so that left the window open for that.
Okay.
That's the reason why it was written.
Okay, Fran?
So I would think that it makes sense before a dramatic change to existing practice to regularize existing practice by way of policy and then refer that or possibly refer that to policy committee in terms of analysis. And I think by the board being responsible for selecting superintendent, assistant superintendent, and directors, it doesn't mean that what the superintendent has to say isn't particularly persuasive, because it's just common sense. It doesn't make sense to hire anyone that the superintendent doesn't believe to be an appropriate assistant. So I think this way the checks and balances are in place, and they're given the existing rigor, giving the rigor of the existing process that also covers off a situation where you have a board that doesn't really have the best idea of who would be the best assistant superintendent without input. So I think that would be covered off. It was just a little language thing in Part 2 consultation that I hadn't noticed before, where 2.1 says the committee will be convened. 2.2 says, and such a committee if convened. So,
should be changed to will.
or such a committee, and cross that out, may include, and who it may include. So that was that little piece. And then the third comment that I wanted to make is that the feedback process that we have now, I believe, is much better than the feedback process that existed before, through lots of work and trials and tribulations of what works or doesn't work. So I think given questions as to the adequacy of the request for feedback in the past, it would be prudent to re-request feedback in order to cover all the bases as well. And having said all of those points, I'm not sure where to go with this.
I think that we could probably request that this, I think, Janice, did you have anything you wanted to add? You didn't speak to this.
I'm thinking that it should go maybe back to either the policy committee or student management to come back answering that, because I think you need to have what we currently do to where it's being changed. We've got that in front of us to understand the process, and so I would be comfortable with it going back to policy committee, senior management with further discussion at another meeting. Because there's lots of questions and concerns, and I think sometimes we play with the trains too much, and it's time to let senior management take the caboose and move forward. But we need to have that conversation on how we feel comfortable about doing that. So more discussion is needed, and it needs to go back either to policy committee or it goes back to management with some of those concerns that Fran brought up. What do we do now currently, and how is this drastically different, sort of side by side, so we can understand the process and maybe get that feedback more. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
So I'll just disagree with you a little bit there, Janice. I don't think this is playing with the trains too much. Creating policy is a fundamental work of all boards of education, and so I think it is good that we're having this discussion. And I wonder if check this with you, Sherry, if this makes sense. If I think I've heard a majority of people say that we would like to see a policy that reflects our current practice. Does it make sense for you to do that work and to bring it back to us at the June board meeting?
Yeah.
And then with the recommendation, whether you figure we should just accept it, send it to the policy committee, send it out for consultation or whatever you think would be the best route.
Yeah. Can do that.
Okay, so if we could have someone make a motion that the board requests management to redraft the policy to policy number 5100R1 to reflect current practice and return it to the board with recommendations at our June 2011 board meeting.
So moved.
That was an ad from me.
That was pretty well done.
Anybody want to second that one?
Second.
Second. Any discussion or comments? Okay.
I think that one of the interesting factors in looking at this then is the role. There may be a piece that's missing here for me where it's about superintendent making recommendations, at least at that level, that those recommendations come to the board for ratification, and not that we establish a process where the board can do an end run around the process and around the superintendent's need to have people report to them. So in the language, I would certainly be looking for something that this is not a place where the board directly responsible for the selection means that we are the ones who establish a hiring process and work with our HR. And if we include these other positions, it gives us authority or some kind of power to, in fact, override these other aspects. And I think we need to be clear that if we're going to have the integrity of our hiring and the integrity of chain of command, that's important to our organization, that we need language that while the board, if it reflects the fact that the board has a role in that, it also reflects that we are giving our superintendent and our secretary treasurer the mandate that they need to have, and that we don't.
We actually, right? As far as I know, in 6 years, 2 terms that I've been on the board actually has had that power to override staff, and I don't ever think I've ever been at a in-camera or public board, well, they were all in-camera meetings for hiring. I have never been at an in-camera meeting, I don't think, where the superintendent was overridden in their thinking, ever. And it was flagrantly disregarded. Never seen that happen. Yeah, and it would be. It would be. Yeah.
I can carry that even further. In 25 years, the superintendent's always been a participant in those selection committees and never been overridden. I can remember at one point where the board was 4 representatives, 2 were split on the selection. It was ultimately the superintendent who made the case for the person who was successful.
So we need to have language that really reflects that and doesn't suddenly somehow open.
Well, we are either in charge of selection or we're not. So, but I guess that's once the policies are drafted, we could. Any other comments? I would just say that I also noticed that there was no mention of the AEC being a part of the committees on this, and I think that they have been a very important part in giving good advice.
This doesn't actually speak to the partner group specifically.
It does.
We ever did?
No, it does actually on.
The 2.2 just says education.
Education.
Where is it? Tip 2, it says administration, employee groups, and education partners. I think the AEC, if we're in a co-governance model with them, I think that they should be distinctly mentioned.
Because
That's only my 2 cents
we've been
worth,
including
though.
them as education partners, that's why, that's where it was.
So can you read the motion back, please?
To request management to redraft policy 5100 and its regulation to reflect current practice and to bring back to the June board meeting.
Okay. Everybody's clear on the motion? All those in favor? And that is unanimously carried. Thank you. Chair's report. I do have a quick report. I wish the tech people were here. So it's not a good thing when Sheila McDonald and I, turns out, when we get sent away for a meeting because we get to talking a little bit. And at the last meeting, we had a good discussion about the amount of paper that gets used for board meetings and our possible use of technology to combat that and to help organize ourselves and so forth. And so we talked about maybe if board members wanted to trial, but not keep, just trial the new technology that the district is using, that maybe we should be having an opportunity to trial it. And so Sheila and I thought we would take the bold step of saying we would like to trial these things, the playbook, to see how that would work for us. And just thought we would let you all know that we have thought that this would be a great thing, and you can shoot at us now if you like, or you can join us in the 21st century. So that's my report.
But we're counting on Alan to give us
for lessons.
I like it, either join us in the 21st century or
you can get a chalkboard from somewhere and use that, like my mom did in Germany. So there you go. Okay, so there you have a little piece of information for you. Management report.
We don't get a chance to shoot at you.
Well, shoot away.
If you want to go that route, you show me the financial justifications regarding the take cost of the
we will.
paper.
Well,
notebook, please.
Actually, this was one of the recommendations that came out of the operational review way back when, so I think you probably are justified in asking for financial justification. And hopefully when we get to making some kind of a recommendation to the board, we can have that information. Thank you. Any other shots?
No, I'm cheap and I'm good.
I think I probably could count the pre-reading that we were asked to do. The cartridges that I use are probably $60 a piece, and I think I may have exhausted one on the pre-reading material that we were required to do in order to be effective at that meeting, and it could have been on the playbook that I would have had with
Well,
us. So
mine was on this.
I think within about 3 cartridges, I think we'll pay for it. Yeah, and of course, I don't charge those back. Like my,
Your expense.
yeah, but there are lots of other, all of this material would be on that,
Yeah.
for sure. And that's, I think, saving.
So thank you for your shot. And. Okay. Superintendent's report.
Just to move to good news items, they're printed on your page, I think it's page 7. Just very quickly, we have had a couple of technology, we've been using technology all day and keeping contact with our Destination Imagination teams as they are embark. I think they start, they start their first event tomorrow. I think that's correct. But what was incredibly interesting for us was as we were getting reports that one of our students, of course, was going to be holding the BC flag and walking into the event carrying the BC flag with her BC team sort of behind her, and that's always a proud moment for the Valley, as they are in Tennessee at the global competition for Destination Imagination, and it sounds like they're pretty excited, very wired. They were training all day and being challenged with all kinds of different kinds of problems, and it sounds like a little bit overwhelmed by the magnitude of how big this really is, and they've been meeting teams who've been saying things to them like, it took us 7 years to get to the globals. And who are you? And how did you get here in 2 years? How exactly did that work? So it speaks to the caliber of the kids that we sent down. It's just an exciting time. So we've been monitoring and harassing Mr. Fussell quite seriously all day as he's been telling us what's been going on. So that's an exciting time for our kids. We have 3 teams there, and it's amazing because we have our elementary school students and high school students representing us at something as large as that. So it's the world competition. It's very exciting for us. We just finished, of course, the Yana You Are Not Alone month, and we were, again, overwhelmed by the response from our schools. There wasn't a school that didn't have at least 1, possibly 2, 3, 5, 10 different events during the month of April raising funds for Yana. That was a commitment we made as a school district to the Yana organization that we would take on April as the Yana month. It was very successful. Lucy Slater, who was our main contact, she's just so lovely, just had sent a very lovely email back about just the heartwarming response from across the district. And because we know that this is a charity that supports our local families and many of our little ones in our system, it was particularly fun to hear the songs. There were some songs that we heard that there wasn't a dry eye in the place. And we saw penny drives and hair shaving, and there's a bunch of vice principals walking around with no hair, and you can tell which ones they were, what school they were at. And so it was just a very good month. The board office ourselves, we did a variety of different things and just wanted to honor that as a cause. And then finally, here we are at track and field time, even despite the weather. Where we are right now is that we've got some very high-end athletes in track and field, and I haven't heard back on the results from the 18th and the 19th, but we'll be able to report that I'm sure they were medal winners. And finally, I just wanted to end with, if anyone managed to get a parking spot in Cumberland this weekend and got anywhere near the parade, unlike myself, who I couldn't see anything because it was 20 people deep, and I'm too short. But if you got a chance to see the Cumberland Marching Band, if you recall, they came to visit us a couple of months ago. What an exciting experience for them. And weren't we all proud? Weren't we all proud when we said, look at those kids with their shiny instruments, and they look so excited and so sharp and so professional. So our hats off to Joanne Hawthorne at Cumberland and the families in Cumberland who have made this happen, and families from across the district, because it's a district team. And I can't see your son in the picture, but I'm sure he's there. And we just wish them all. And we heard today that one of their goals might be for next year going to the Calgary Stampede and being in that parade. So that's what they're shooting for now, which is kind of exciting. They have a fundraiser coming up. Man Tracker's coming to Cumberland. I just can't even go there. But he's coming as a fundraiser for them, and hopefully a draw. So if we can get the word out in our communities to support them, the fundraising for that goes to the marching band. So that's where we are. So that's the end of my report now.
I'd just like to add one thing, that this is not something that this particular teacher is paid to do. This is something that she does outside of the timetable, and we have a bunch of teachers in our district that do pretty cool stuff like that, and it's very neat, and thanks to them.
Just to add to that, Susan, that Joanne wrote me today to say that she had 2 people approach her at the park yesterday to say, this marching band, can we get you to come to one of our opening events, right? Like, you can imagine, like, there's a big store apparently opening here soon, and they would probably love to have the marching band, I mean, this is so big. I've been in this district for a long time. We've always dreamed of a marching band, and now there it is. So it's great, and it was just everything that Tristan McClellan was standing beside me. It was everything we could have wished for yesterday and more, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I had a good seat. I followed them.
We saw you holding the banner.
I thought they used in small town. Very
Nice.
good theme song.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's pretty cool. From a dream to a reality.
So the next item on my report is the district calendar for 2011-2012. It appears on page 8, and with a briefing note from District Principal Jeff Taylor, who is actually supervising Gerald Fussell. I'm not so worried about the kids, that's for sure. About what Gerald will come back with or what he'll commit us to. So I said, Jeff, just say no, Jeff. Just say no. So he's in Tennessee and is able to speak to it tonight, but Assistant Superintendent Sheila Shanahan will walk you through the document.
Great, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, you have in front of you the proposed documents, the 2-week spring break as proposed. You sent us away to do some work with our partner groups, and that has been accomplished successfully. And so our recommendation is that you notice we've sent you around an amended second page. You have one with highlighting on it. So that would replace the one that's there. There were a couple of later updates of start and finish times, and I'll talk to those in a moment. So there is the calendar as proposed for your decision, and then as is required in May that you would talk about the specifics at each of the schools, and so we have there provided the start and finish times. Probably the biggest change has been at secondary, and that has been part of the transportation review around providing coordinated transportation with transit and other pieces to ensure the students are not late for school at Vanier and not too early for somewhere else, and that we can have some connections to the schools. The principals and vice principals have worked this year and worked with their staffs as well. The timetables at the large secondaries have always rotated. So if the blocks went A, B, C, D one day, they went to B, C, D, A the next, and they always flipped. And so there was a very concentrated effort to try to bring some consistency to all three schools for basically educational reasons, to impact certainly the opportunities for students who may need to be at one point in a morning at one school and perhaps at an afternoon at another. And from our employee standpoint, as we see the decline going through secondary, we may find that our specialists then would be able to teach in two schools rather than having to teach their specialty plus a math class or their specialty in something else. So we're trying to line up those timetables appropriately. So by next year, the mornings will be consistent and the afternoons. So they can rotate their mornings and their afternoons, but typically they'll be identical in terms of noon hour and those sorts of things, so that if teachers needed to travel, which we actually have a couple doing that, and we anticipate that it will be some benefit for some students who may be missing one course that they'd like for grade 12, but it might be available down the road in the afternoon, those sorts of things. So we've worked towards that, and hence those are the start and finish times. And not only were they impacted by transportation, but keeping them quite closely aligned so that we could have that movement of staff, etc. So those are the two recommendations from the calendar committee for your approval, we hope.
Anybody have any questions? Janice?
The lunch breaks between secondary schools, you're talking about aligning timetables, but I know the lunch breaks are a little bit different. So you have courses in the morning and the afternoon. Was that taken into consideration, or is that a reason why that they're separate for clarification as to?
I think the reason they're as close as they could be with some alignment, because the schools have what's called teacher advisor time, and in each of the schools it's a little bit different. So we were cognizant of providing at least a clear window. It might be a little bit different, as you say, by 10 or 20 minutes, but there is a window there if someone needed to travel. And it also, there was a little bit of community reflection. I know that there was one community in particular that wanted the availability of time for their kids to go home for lunch, and that's reflected there as well.
Yeah, follow-up question. The ISFIL, I see it's down at 3:30. Some of the concerns I heard from parents was after-school jobs for some of the students, because it is a bit later than it was before. Mm-hmm. How are the transit buses aligned up to that time for them to get from point A to point B?
Part of that piece, Chuck Morris has been working with transit around that alignment of them catching their bus. It might be a quick catch, but there is opportunity for them to actually line up with transit to get back down to the north or down over to the west. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sheila?
Well, one of the things that came up several times at our 21st Century Learning Conference there was about who on earth created the 5x8 timetable or whatever. So, I certainly appreciate all the work that you're doing on this, but I hope within a couple of years that we will just see a completely different picture, and that all those kids at high school will basically have open snacks as opposed to this, lunchtime help.
Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Just one more comment, Madam Chair. Certainly, if you approve the calendar, we would want to probably put some very specific semantics around the days that we provided. For example, in August, Pro-D-Loo days would be changed to non-instructional days so that they actually match up with our current language. But we proposed it that way so that people understood that those had moved from other places in the calendar. And my understanding is I think July might be the wrong year. It's not correct at all. But know that we will check those pieces very carefully. But I think it's been pulled. It's just not July. It doesn't match up with August.
Yeah,
That's June.
It's June.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh, so July 1 would be at the bottom of it. That's what they're meaning. Okay, so it's just the title. It's just the title.
June's
No,
calendar.
it's
It's
just
June's
the
calendar
first
in
would be
its
there.
entirety.
Because the first is a Friday.
We need to change it. We need to change it.
It looks pretty.
I think that the aligning the bell schedules pretty much is maybe a little bit controversial and a bit of a change, but I think it is a good thing. In the past, when we did the consultation around grade structure, often people would talk about a concern that there would not be specialist teachers available to teach specialist courses. And I remember one teacher saying, oh my God, I have to teach blah, 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 and I haven't done that in 20 years, and I'm not comfortable with it, but that's what I have to do to keep my full-time job. And so I think that this is going to create some good opportunities for kids and staff to teach to their passion and passionate teachers.
And that's our intent, and also to keep some of the things that are really important, but because we've and for all the right reasons, gone to a smorgasbord kind of offering in public education in British Columbia, but to keep, for example, Japanese alive, where you might only have enough students for Japanese 9 and Japanese 11, which is kind of how that goes, in one building. And so, but you'd only have 2 blocks of it at, say, Highland, and that you could have 2 blocks of it at Isfeld, and that teacher then could end up with 4 blocks rather than going south to a larger city to find at least 4 blocks in their field, right? So we're trying to hang on to some of those special experiences, the high-end, some math courses and the elective courses in the senior grades that certain kids would want to continue with, but maybe we'll get to a place where they might need to then go mornings at Isfeld and afternoons at Highland and pick up Calculus 12 that year and Physics 12 there. Right, so they'll keep them alive with teachers who are committed to teaching them, and that's their field, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Just to follow up, with the early dismissal reporting to parents on the calendar, one of the elementary school packs I was at, parents don't quite understand what that entails. That is where they have a chance to go and speak to teachers, is my understanding, the early dismissal reporting. So they were wondering when the calendar came out if something could be on there, giving parents, that's what it's there for. It's not for the kids leaving early, for teachers to have some time off. It's for parents and teachers to connect over your students. So that was a request that I was after bringing forward on that would be something that they would ask. Most people, like, some people don't understand what that is for, and it's to get their information out. And part of that 21st century learning is where parents are connecting more with their teachers on what their children are doing and get that personal learning. So that would be something that I would really like to see, if at all possible, please. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a recommended motion here that the board adopt the district calendar and operating times for all facilities for 2011-12 as presented. I don't know if anybody wants to make that. So move. Do we have a seconder? Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, just item 3 is the long-range planning update. That's just a rural update from me because in many ways there's not a lot to report because the deadline, which was a ministry deadline, seems to have disappeared because in their non-action in approving any capital projects, what we expected and what we were told at the beginning of the process was that there was an impetus to have all this done by June 30th because it would be the benchmark by which the ministry would approve any capital projects. The good news is we've done the work, and we've done the work thoroughly. The better news is that they seem to have backed off on the June 30th deadline. We keep waiting for it to actually be published as the deadline. They talked about it, but it hasn't happened yet. It also is coinciding with the fact that basically they haven't approved anything for 2 years in capital projects, and as we move into a new election, we're suspecting that they're not going to be approving anything meaningful until that's over. So as I think I reported once before, there was a mandated process from the ministry. We were involved, senior staff, for the last 5-6 months now, fairly intensely. Excellent consultant has worked us through the parameters that the ministry sets around long-range facility plan. And basically what that is mapping out the future of the valley in terms of our building use and in terms of school use for buildings and any other possible usages, and then basically having a blueprint of where we think we're going in the future with our buildings and their use. The idea would be that as we plan for the future and we look at the various buildings around us, we ask ourselves, have we got the right student body in line there? Are the catchments appropriate? Are the boundaries appropriate? Are they servicing the students that are most appropriate in that neighborhood? have we centralized services in the right place, in the wrong place? All those kinds of questions we've been asking ourselves and have made some recommendations. The board's been involved in 2 discussions so far as we worked on the draft. And so what we'd like to suggest is that we get that draft to the public with your indulgence at some kind of public forum for some feedback from the public. As I say, we thought that there was a pretty set deadline is June 30th. We've been told both by the consultant and then I asked on Thursday, one of the superintendents of achievement, and was told that they're probably not going to even do anything with it till after the election or in the fall. So we will either look at putting together a public forum with some feedback from the public on the draft in June. Our dilemma with that is the consultant that we've worked with, who we really believe is an asset in this project, is in Australia as of the 18th of May to June 23rd. So we'd have to do it without him, or he'd be available for us in early September right away. So we'll work with you to determine what the best time would be to have a public forum on where we are with the draft. And we believe that we're in no jeopardy around the original deadline. We think it's actually passed. The good news is it's been really great work. And as I say, we've worked with a highly skilled consultant who has reflected everything that we've asked for and said from the times that we've worked with him. And he has very good data, very accurate, very good data, very skilled. So I think that you've seen him as he presented to you twice, and he'd be more than willing to come back and help facilitate a public forum on the document itself. For your then feedback, and then we can make the changes that need. It's still in draft form. It's certainly not anywhere past draft. So we'll just work to see with you to see whether or not you would like us to do that in June or to wait till early September. And that's where we are with that.
Any comments? Sheila?
I think that it has been a pretty good process. It was interesting that there was some considerable criticism of the process at a couple of school districts in the Victoria area. I just think that it is quite important that we also get this information to our partner group, or potential partners, our partners and the municipalities and other agencies that may have a stake. Because I do think that they are somewhat different from just members of the public, and I think that our opportunities, no matter whether we've had good relationships with them in the past, we do need to have good relationships going forward, and their ability to take our information into their planning process, especially if we might have chances to get some significant capital from the provincial government around our own use of facilities and any ideas they might have. So I really would encourage us to give a mandate to staff to include the municipalities, and there are some other interesting players, potential North Island College, Health Viva, Ministry of Children and Families, in terms of, and the RCMP in terms of how they deliver their services. That we should just make sure that they don't feel we're overlooking the importance of our relationships with them as we go out for public input.
Anyone else? Well, for me, I think it's really important that we do this well, which I think we're on the way to doing it very well so far, and that we get it right. I remember sitting here 3 years ago after the government had announced that they were headed towards implementing all-day kindergarten, and I remember telling the board at the day that, we really need to take this into consideration, that our space needs have changed, the effects of declining enrollment would be negated by this new initiative by the government, and that we would be in an increasing enrollment situation soon in elementary schools. And I think that Hugh Skinner has reflected that in his comments to us, and I certainly finally feel validated 3 years ago that my analysis was correct, that the effects of all-day kindergarten do mean that the effects of declining enrollment are finished in elementary school. And I just can't help but think of, we're going to be passing another bylaw this evening for however a couple $1 million. We already passed one for $607,000. I don't know if that includes the cost of the modular units themselves or if this is just to site them, but there's, roughly $2.5 million taxpayer dollars that we've now had to spend on siting modular units, where if we would have done a better job last time, considering our space needs in the future, maybe we would have saved the taxpayers that money and it could have gone to something else. So I'm really appreciative of the work that we're doing and the thought that's going into this, and I do look forward to hearing from the public on this. Fran?
I would be inclined for public meetings to be in the fall with him facilitating, just because I also was impressed with his work, and I think it's a logical follow-through to have him there to be able to answer questions and to guide us.
He has a huge provincial perspective, which is really been helpful.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, so the Budget Advisory Committee and Budget Update, most of the information is contained in the briefing note before you. Just to highlight a couple of things, that the one announcement that actually went out today was the Town Hall Information Forum that will be happening next week, June the 1st. We had a general discussion at the Budget Advisory Committee level itself, just to give them a summation of what we've done to date, and as well as giving them sort of a heads up in terms of what is expected with the forum itself. So again, the information's gone out, and probably, I guess, is going to hit the newspapers this week. Okay.
Today, tomorrow, and Friday.
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Highlighting some other things on here. We're still operating with a status quo rollover budget. Mid-month, we'll submit to the board a list of some of the budget items for consideration. That'll come forward, like I said, mid-month, so that we can address the annual budget for the end of the month coming forward at the June meeting itself. Two announcements that occurred last week and the week before. My note was good news, bad news, reflecting what how the minister sort of brought it out. But anyways, the bad news being the additional insurance costs being passed down to the school districts. Bad news. Good news was that the following week was the announcement for the final release of the 11-12 or the 10-11 funding holdback sort of thing. So it's anticipated funds. We just didn't know how much it was going to be. So 125 will go a long ways to pay next year's insurance costs. Okay.
Thank you.
Second item, I believe it's just housekeeping. It's just the Queenish after-school club contract being brought forward to you.
I have a question. Is it important, this talks about the Queenish After School Club contract, should it say lease in there? So are we leasing it to them now?
It shouldn't matter.
So it doesn't make any difference?
I don't think so.
Okay, just thought I would clarify that. Okay, so someone like to read?
I would move that School District Number 71, Comox Valley, approve the Queenish After School Club contract, receive its first reading.
Second?
Second.
It just occurs to me that we're doing this here and nobody has a clue in the public what the heck we're talking about. So what this is that the lease to the Queenish After School Club for the space that they use at Queenish has been renewed, and so we need to pass a bylaw to ratify, I guess, the lease that they're getting. So that's why we're doing this. Okay, any discussion on this? All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Another reader?
That School District Number 71, Comox Valley, approves the Queenish After School Club contract to receive its second reading.
Second.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
I would move that the Board unanimously agree to suspend the requirements of the School Act and the Board's procedural bylaw 2007 to have third reading in a subsequent meeting.
Second. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried with one abstention by me. Have a third reading?
Move that School District 71, Comox Valley, approve the Queenish After School Club contract to receive its third and final reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried with one abstention by me. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on then through the chair. So the third item is the use of restricted capital reserve for the capital projects. A couple events occurred in the last 4 months, Airport Elementary, basically the boiler was condemned, for lack of a better term. It's not working, they don't have heat effectively, and so in order to be able to move the timeline up for this, obviously, is to prep it for the September startup, needing the funds to be able to do that. And the second thing, obviously, being with the Cape Plazo, the consolidation of the Brooklyn catchment to the the Cape Plazo Elementary. There's still some transition work needing to be done. We're asking that we put them together in terms of a funding arrangement to the ministry. The ministry is anticipating. We've certainly vetted this through them in terms of what we need to do, and effectively they're saying the funds are in your capital reserve, and therefore if you were to basically seek permission from the minister, they would pass it through, and it would be basically put through the normal motions. The money's, just a refresher, the restricted capital funds are funds that is almost a joint use funds with the ministry and the local districts. It's sitting in our accounts as a reserve, but we still need to seek ministry approval on these funds. And so they're funds that have arisen for the sale of assets, sale of whether they be land, whether they be assets, and that kind of thing. And so they go back to the local district with the caveat that you ask permission to use those funds. So this is a procedure, is what we would do if we get the board support. We would issue a letter to the minister basically asking approval to use these funds for these purposes.
Any questions? I just have one on this bylaw that you've given us to read next. It says the AFG funding grant, read a bylaw for $1,048,000. My recollection is in the past we've gotten $1.6 million.
And I'll address that when we...
So I'm wondering if we need to adjust this one because we're not getting enough, or...
No, because the next bylaw, they are actually giving us 1.6. 600,000 is coming through operating funds, and 1 million is coming through capital funds.
Okay, good.
So,
Okay, thank you. Okay, someone like to make a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Right there.
That the board supports the use of restricted capital reserve for the airport elementary boiler upgrade and transition work at Cape Plazo, the amount of $650,000, and direct staff to seek the required approval from the Ministry of Education is the motion. Any discussion?
Can we just commend Airport for being hardy Canadians during the
there's a commercial here, isn't there?
There is a
They're
commercial.
showing the energy saving.
Yeah. Well, they've been creative, believe me.
Yeah, there should be some carbon offset refunds, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you would think.
They'll win the
It
budget.
should be. It's probably a 50-year-old boiler there. Okay, so all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
And the final two, moving on to the last two capital projects. So again, the AFG is 1.6 is the total funds. $1 million is coming through capital. So in order to get those funds released, basically we're asking for a bylaw to receive 1.48 million in funding. They've been, I don't want to rehash this too much, but they've sort of been modifying after the scare of 2 years ago when they discontinued AFG funds temporarily. They've been reinstating it in different manners. So last year we had to make a cash flow, if you want, or indicate to them at the beginning of the year. Well, yeah, we had to provide for them a cash flow analysis of how we were using the funds. So that was unique to AFG at the time. They still released the funds through operating dollars, which meant based on these cash flow, they sent the money on a monthly basis. This year they're changing it a wee bit, saying that we'll release the 600 on a cash flow, or 600,000 on a cash flow basis, and the $1 million will come as a bylaw, also as a cash flow. But the theory being we draw it as we need it. So this year, like I said, it's different. And speaking to the lack of bylaw capital that the ministry is releasing these days, this is part of the reason. They're basically allocating some of these capital funds for different reasons. And then, as we see later on, we're going to see the modular program that's taking and eating up a lot of the ministry bylaw capital program. Okay?
Any questions?
No, just spend it fast so we can get it out of their bank account.
We try to.
It'll be gone pretty
Work
quick.
permitting.
It's all right.
Okay. Want to read?
Okay, I would move that School District 71 Comox Valley Capital Project Bylaw number 126323 in the amount of $1,048,729 receive its first reading.
Seconder?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously.
I would move the School District 71 Comox Valley Capital Project Bylaw number 126323 in the amount of $1,048,729 receive its second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously.
We don't have to do the waiting.
No, not for
No,
not
not
for
for
financial
bylaws.
bylaws. It's okay to do it all at once.
I would move the School District 71 Comox Valley Capital Project Bylaw number 126323 in the amount of $1,048,729 receive its third and final reading.
Second.
This is getting old. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
We're making good time. The second one that was added, the full-day kindergarten modular siting. And so this is funds, as we know, this is our second amendment to the original bylaw. The first bylaw, just by way of history, the first bylaw gave us the planning money, the $102,000, and that was done back in May 2010. The second amendment upped the bylaw to $607,000, which included the siting costs. Okay, so you got the planning, you got the siting. This third amendment to the original bylaw, which is now for a full 2.607-603, includes now the capital cost of the 8 modulars being sited. So they've actually given us a little bit extra based on a revised estimates for the actual siting costs, and they've included the $1.6 million for the modular classrooms themselves. So this is the transfer of the actual asset cost as defined by the ministry. Okay.
So those units are $200,000
No,
a piece?
250.
210.
Man. I couldn't believe it.
And somehow that's going to come back that we actually have to.
Yeah, 215. I couldn't believe it when I read
And
that.
so by the nature of this, just so you're aware, by them giving us the funds to purchase the asset, they become our asset. No different than when they give us funds to build a school, they become our asset.
So then, from now on, they're
responsible.
ours, and it's our responsibility to find the money to upkeep them and do all
Yeah,
those things.
absolutely.
And they have to do that in one sense, but no good deed goes stretched the other way. And so the good deed is that they paid for them originally, but then the upkeep and all those other things that will be
Comes
maintained
out of
by them
existing
comes out of
funds.
our existing funds. That's why they've switched them over to us, right? And that's why we have to know what their value is.
When they sell them off, they become restricted capital.
In theory, yeah.
In theory.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how they own them. Yeah.
Janice, then Fran?
So new home warranty, do they come with any warranty?
We might know we can ship them back.
Well, the reality is if something happens, it's our responsibility. The manufacturer doesn't cover any warranty.
I'm sure there's
There
a
is some
timing
warranty.
of, basically they're citing them under their guidance
Let's look
and
at that
our
building
workers.
There'll be
Yeah.
a contractor's warranty.
Okay.
But like any new school we build, once the contractor's warranty, once you've signed the building off and you've dealt with all the contract, you're left to deal with the contractor warranty. That's the piece, is the frustration of the school. They build a building and then you discover that all the HVAC is backwards. That's been a personal experience in my life, going into a branch backwards, totally inside out. Didn't work, of course. And so the district was left to pursue the warranty through the contractor who was busy in the northern communities building more schools and not particularly interested about fixing the HVAC system. It's just, that's just how it goes, right? Just,
Once you take
just how it
possession,
goes.
yeah. Once you take possession.
That's it.
Yeah.
Fran?
Just curious about the cost of a modular versus the cost of a portable. 210,000 versus just ballpark. Curious.
80,000, is that what?
Portables, last portable we purchased was about 9,000.
And these are much nicer.
But they don't have.
Well, they're 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They don't have square footage, so the new modulars are 110 square meters
Yeah, twice as nice.
So,
as compared to 9.
Bathrooms, water.
I have two questions. I hope that I'm not out of line with these questions, but one is did we get enough money to do all the hookups? I'm going to look at Sherry when I ask these, and you can...
I'll give you the nod if it's not the right question.
So did we get
Too
enough?
late now.
Did we get all the money for all the hookups? And I wonder, these are being cited, I guess, in a couple of different municipalities. Is the municipalities being cooperative with issuing permits to site these portables, or is that out of line? I'm not sure.
Well, spoken as it is, I'm sure I can answer that question. We've had, so the ministry actually designed the modulars, decided, with our input based on our enrollment, decided how many we needed, and we were grateful for them, I'm not saying that. And then also was in deep consultation with us about where they would be placed. And we've been successful in placing them in Cumberland and in Comox, in the places that the ministry expected them to be, and we expected them to be. We have not been successful in placing them all in Courtenay. We have some and not others. We are unable to secure a building permit in Courtenay for Valley View Elementary. There was an expectation by the ministry and ourselves that there would be a modular on that site, and we have been in discussion with this City of Courtenay over many instances, and we are not able to get a building permit for that modular, and we've since moved past it and are looking to site it at another school because we've missed basically all the deadlines about getting it sited in time for September. So we're quite disappointed about our ability to use a purpose-built modular unit on site at Valley View as determined by the ministry and certainly by our own local knowledge. We had wanted a full-day kindergarten class to start there in September, and we've not been able to secure that building permit.
That's shameful. Janice?
So I guess my concern is at Valley View, and going back to my years as a parent there, when there were 7 portables on that school. There's not 7 portables now, am I correct?
No, there's not, and in fact, it's certainly not at peak capacity.
So I guess what irks me the most is back then they allowed 7 portables on that school to support the student population. And it really bothers the City of Courtenay can't come to the table to support the students in that area. And I would hope that someone there would take them to task on that, because that is irresponsible.
I think it should be us that takes them to task.
I'm thinking of parents and elections.
So, Madam Chair, we've been in consultation with the City of Courtenay, as I say, a number of times. They're very clear on what they're expecting us to do, and it is regarding traffic, our ability to influence traffic in that area, particularly not on the school ground, but on the streets that coincide, Valley View Drive. We don't have the ability to influence traffic on streets that don't belong to us, or certainly that we can't influence. And they have made a demand that we add substantial, there's a good word, extraordinary amount of parking on that school site. Certainly different than the bylaws we originally adhered to when the school was built. We certainly have the parking that currently exists under their bylaws around staff ratio to parking. And we understand that there is traffic flow issues in and out of Valley View, and we've done everything that we think we can do. We've changed the routes, we've moved things over, we've done everything. There was a series of things they've asked us to do. The one that we simply do not have the resources to meet is their demand for parking. They're looking for a total of 106 parking spaces on that school site. We don't believe we have the resources to do it. We don't believe it's necessary. We don't believe that the 106 parking spaces could be remotely connected to what is the traffic flow problem on the Valley View Street, and we wonder why a standard, it's an American engineering standard, is being applied now. We understand there's a traffic problem, and we're doing our very best to educate parents as they drop off, create drop-off lanes, but our difficulty is that we don't have the ability to influence it on Valley View Drive off of our school site, and we believe we just simply can't meet the desire of the City of Courtenay for 106 parking spaces on Valley View Drive, off of Valley View Drive on our school site.
This doesn't make sense. We're not sending more children to that school.
We are not.
We're just simply leaving the kindergarten children there
for the whole day. Certainly it's true, and we've talked about the number of this actually full-day K decreases the number of traffic interactions during the course of a day, where half-day kindergarten moms would bring their little ones in the morning and then come and pick them up at just about lunchtime, and they would then, of course, be joined by moms dropping off, whatever. And so, ironically, full-day K has decreased the number of traffic interactions. And there was a couple of other suggestions made by the City of Courtenay that we simply didn't believe would fit in that community, busing, for example. We don't believe that that community would respond to us busing their students. And then staggering our start times for various grades, we think that would put an undue burden on families.
Yeah,
so we've come to an impasse, and we've gotten to a place where we had to move on because we had missed all these deadlines around the building permit that we needed. So we're looking to relocate it to another school, and we haven't had those same criteria applied to us at our other building sites in other communities, and in fact in other school sites in Courtenay.
And that's going to impact childcare.
Well, at this point in time, we are scrambling because what appears to be one of our only options is to ask the daycare to relocate because we need the classroom for full day K.
Do you think, Sheila talks often about talking to our municipal partners. Do you think that there might be a role for the board here at all to speak to council or mayor with regards to this?
I think it would be helpful. I have to say that we talked about a number of issues on that one. That we started with Valley View because it is our most pressing issue. When I met with the mayor and with Chuck, and we met with some of their civil servants and their engineers, and we left with we need to work together on a variety of issues. But we did come to we're at a complete impasse around this, and I did say to them, this is really difficult for me to go back to that school community and say that they can't have a purpose-built modular because we don't have the resources to build enough parking spaces when we have the bylaw, where we met a bylaw, and it's still the bylaw right now. And I really, in my mind, can't see 106 parking spaces on the Valley View lot.
No.
So that's a dilemma for us, and that's going to continue to be a dilemma for us. So as the building stands, we won't get a building permit for any additional building, whatever that is, a modular, a garden shed, anything, from the City of Courtenay unless we can meet that standard. That's what we've been told. So we left it open to continue to talk to them, and we went away to brainstorm, and we've come to the place now where we're looking perhaps to have to move the daycare. So we believe that if the board was interested, it's always good to find solutions from a variety of different places, and if the board wanted to help us engage in advocacy with the City of Courtenay around this issue, we'd certainly be pleased to help you organize that.
Well, maybe it would make sense for you to invite them to come here to meet with us. Janice?
I was going to make a recommendation that we invite the City Council to come and have a conversation with the board. But I also would like to make the statement, I was a parent at Valley View for a number of years when there were 7 portables, and my kids went there, and I'm quite aware of the parking. I'm also quite aware of the daycare and the essential part she plays in that community. How many years is she there? And I'm actually appalled that City of Courtenay has come to our line on this one and not have a conversation with the Board of Trustees. When I was there, and Mr. Douglas, you were the principal at the time, parking was maybe 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, and the parking lot was empty. And for us to add 56 more parking spots where parking lot is empty in the morning and evenings is just absolutely ridiculous. So I make the motion that this board invites City Council to come meet with us to discuss the impact of the Valley View situation.
Second.
Okay, so the understanding would be we would let staff
Yeah,
arrange the meeting for us? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Any discussion on that? Fran?
Just a question, is it too late?
Better make the meeting quick.
Yeah,
Make
we
it
have
quick
to have it
then.
very quickly because we're about to try and site it somewhere else.
Make it quick.
So if it's not too late, I'd say it makes sense.
Yeah.
But
The modulars start arriving.
Some of them are here.
Well, first one is
They're-
right
So,
there.
Yeah.
For the new site, we've already expended funds to prep the site, the
Yeah.
engineering fees.
Yeah, and all that.
The application's gone in
Yeah.
already.
Because that's our deadline. That's what you see. You have to do the other things to get the other building permits so that you have something to open in September. We've been at this for 7 months around this building permit, and we had to get to a place where we had to. Now, and not underscoring, and I think that's where we led with the city, and we left with the city. Is we're not at all negating that there is a traffic issue at Valley View. And we're doing everything in our power to deal with that as they would expect us to and as we would expect ourselves to do. It's not an issue that we believe, that we don't believe exists. But we're not convinced that the 106 parking spaces are going to resolve that issue, because most parents are not parking. They're stopping and dropping their students off, and some will continue to stop and drop their students off on Valley View Drive and have their students walk in. And we don't have traffic police. We can't issue tickets or do anything on a street that doesn't belong to us, which is part of our dilemma. That Valley View Drive is not something that we can control. They could, we suggested to the city that they have the ability to put signage on Valley View Drive that doesn't allow parking. It's residential parking only, no stopping. We don't have the ability to do that. They do. So we are not negating that we have a safety issue. We'd love to resolve this somehow, but we're getting very close to the turnaround time where we won't be able to. But if we could get it soon, we could have a look at it.
Okay,
Our dilemma is that we won't ever get a building permit until it's resolved.
Well, then
We need
to
a building.
talk to
We need to get it resolved.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's for this modular or not, we did leave with the understanding that we will never get a building permit until this is sorted.
That's correct.
So the implication is the mayor is included in this.
I don't care who, I want them all here.
Yeah, the mayor. To be fair, the mayor can help facilitate the conversation.
And but the other issue too is we have a daycare come September. We need to resolve the.
Well, we have to make
we
a
do.
decision about the daycare by
Yeah.
June 1st.
Yeah, we have
or
to.
June 15th. So
Yeah.
people can talk about it.
I just want to confirm what Janet's saying, because as somebody who picks up a couple of grandchildren on a regular basis there.
You're
It's
part of the problem.
10 to 15 minutes, no, I always find a parking spot somewhere on the school grounds. They've actually even got a security guard now.
They do.
That's patrolling on the school grounds themselves.
So we're thinking we're doing everything we can to keep the traffic moving. We've got a hired security guard. We've moved things over. We're talking about, we've created the lanes that they've asked for in the list of things that they've cited us with. The parking spaces and our ability to influence traffic on a street that doesn't belong to us, we're at a loss.
Thanks for drawing this to our attention. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor. Can you read it back, please, Heather?
Right, from the city according to specialization, the board to assess the impact of the Valley View situation.
Okay. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Did this pass?
Not yet. So
Just need to go back to your.
Yeah, so the
final
original.
vote.
Yes, for the
bylaw.
we didn't read
I would
everything.
move,
yet.
I
Thank
would
you.
move that School District 71 Comox Valley Capital Project Amendment Bylaw number 126160B in the amount of $2,607,603 receive its first reading.
I'll second. Oh, mix it up a little. Okay, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. You want to read now?
Sure. That's School District Number 71, Comox Valley Capital Project Amendment Bylaw Number 126160-B in the amount of $2,607,603 receive its second reading.
Okay, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Third reading?
That's School District Number 71, Comox Valley Capital Project Amendment Bylaw Number 126160-B in the amount of $2,607,603 receive its third and final reading.
Second. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Human resources?
So on page 13, I have a list of requirements for that. So I'm going to read them. First of all, the Burns School teacher at Mount District will retire June 30th after 15 years of service to the district. Laura Berger, teacher at Cumberland Elementary, will retire June 30th after 15 years of service to the district. Susanna Calger, a counselor in student services, will retire April 30th after 18 years of service to the district. Sandy Malcolm, teacher at Jacob Daniel, will retire June 30th after 18 years of service. Anita Watchell, learning support teacher at Aspen Park, will retire June 30th after 21 years of service to the district. And Dale Atchison, a learning support teacher at Colorado Road, will retire June 30th after 31 years of service to the district. And all these folks will be honored at the June 15th retirement function of the board. My report.
Thank you.
Receive the management report.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Board committee reports?
No Finance Committee report, nothing was referred to us. The next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, my Tom Weber sends his regrets for this evening. He's out of town on a business trip. So, Sheila or Fran, anything you want to say about the Policy Advisory Committee?
Sheila, I was absent at that meeting.
The minutes are there.
Okay, thank you.
I love that.
Excellent report. Excellent report.
Say no more.
Okay, and Education Committee?
You have my minutes there as well. And once again, thank you, Alan Douglas, for that outstanding technological display. And I would move receipt of my report.
We'll just move the receipt of all three of those reports at once: Finance, Policy Advisory, and Education Committee.
do it.
And anybody want to second those? Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. And ad hoc committee report. I don't know who wants to speak to this one. Sherry?
I actually think that we're going to, I almost did it again. Director Morris is going to, I almost said inspector again. How can you tell I'm tired? Inspector Morris. It's like Inspector Gadget, sorry.
People usually call
No,
him
it's
Norris.
Inspector Morris. It's the English detective.
Yeah, I've watched it. It's a good show.
Sorry, I'm tired. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
Director Morris actually has a PowerPoint to just share a little bit because there was some, just to show some of the work that's been done so far on the routes, and then there's a briefing note that he certainly can speak to and answer questions from. So we'll just move to that. And Captain Technology is assisting him.
See, look at the confidence he goes.
I know he's so helpful now. He doesn't even pay for it.
Hang on. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Sheila and I will impress you with our...
Take the opportunity to read the briefing
Yeah,
note.
so just have a look at the briefing note, and if you have
you
any
can-
questions.
Could draw attention to possibly.
Right, and so in the briefing note, at the very end of the briefing note, just before board action, we have been talking and have begun to design a process of public consultation, including surveying the parents in order to provide some feedback for the broader discussion about busing and charging fees. And so we're looking at a mechanism by which we could, in the fall, ask for feedback from parents about what would they be willing to pay for busing to programs of choice or to outside of their normal catchment area. And if they would, what would they possibly consider would be reasonable for them to pay? So we have some data for the trustees as they continue this conversation around schools of busing for programs of choice. We'll be able to give them some feedback and some data from surveys that have been presented. We also have just started this week dry run testing, and I know that sounds funny, but it's better to start dry run testing in May and June than September 3rd, when you find out that either the information you sent out about where the bus stop was is incorrect, badly worded and no one understood it, or nobody read it, where there's 25 kids standing in one street corner and 2 blocks over there's an empty bus. Also, just we have calculated with the help of student choice and for student, the timing of bus routes, of course, and we've done them as closely as we can, but until you actually drive the route with kids on and off the bus and nothing can prevent us from ever being able, we'll never be able to predict adolescents, teenagers getting on and off a bus, how long it might take, how it might take you no time, or if you calculate it's going to take 20 minutes, that day it'll take 5. And the next day you think it's going to take 5, it'll take 30. So we're just trying to do some dry runs to get it right. And Chuck is going to lead us through this. Yes.
Because of shifting population over time, some stops have become inefficient. This review identifies current family locations and allows us to respond by aligning routes to become more efficient. Up to this point, there's been no process to identify who should be on a given bus. It's nearly impossible in some cases to identify eligible riders or courtesy riders. Because of ferry schedules and bell times, approximately 100 students were typically late for class each day at Daniel. And of course, complaints. These identified shortcomings that we may not have been aware of. We're at the end, we're just about at the end of our first year of a 5-year contract with First Student. busing our children. And we've been working with First Student on a continuous basis to try to improve the service offered. We contracted with First Planning, they're a subsidiary of First Student. And as we wanted to take an in-depth look into our current busing practice based upon current district policy. To assist with secondary student busing and having to adhere to ferry schedules, bell times at secondary schools have been moved for educational purposes, but that fits right hand in hand with our needs. It allows a little more flexibility, and the buses will arrive on time, get the children into class without them being late. This will provide a level of comfort to students, parents, and the school. The students should not be running late any longer. Because of the volume of students from Courtenay West and other areas, we shortened the secondary walk limit from 4.8 kilometers to 4.0. And for elementary, all from K to 7, the walk limit's been shortened to 1.6 kilometers. Shortening walk limits allow us to bus more children and removes the little ones from roadways that can be dangerous. Once routes and times, we'll need to take a hard look at them once routes are timed, and we anticipate some adjustments will be necessary. Routes on the website identified in a format like this are very difficult for most people to follow, and some of us to understand. A lot of them have been quite difficult.
Perfect.
Once our new routes are completed, they'll be transferred into a map just like this. It's much easier to visualize and understand. Now, on the longer routes, it will be shown on the website as a number of squares that you can click right into, and it'll be enlarged, and you can see right down the bus stop.
21st century.
We've been passing information to transit, bell times, and other logistical information. As they advised us, they were willing to add more service that would coordinate with our secondary mornings and afternoons, and add some other runs that might help the public. To confirm and put to rest some misunderstanding from some people, if a student is picked up in the morning and is driven to school in a yellow bus, that student will be returned home in a yellow bus. If you're a courtesy rider, it would be our goal to apply the same guarantee as well. There will be a process to register for busing. You need to be able to identify the students that are on our buses. It will be available online and from schools within approximately a 2-week period. This is for all parents who believe their children qualify to ride a yellow bus. The completed forms, we will ask that they be back in the district office by early July. We're in anticipation.
What a team. What a team.
Registration, this will allow us to create bus passes for all students riding the school bus. It will ensure someone does not sneak on and take the seat of the registered rider, as has happened quite frequently. Courtesy riders will be allowed on buses after September 30th of each year. This is because the student numbers that vary quite a bit, and some of them move around. We will not be able to identify our available seats until approximately the end of September. Once we show stable numbers and areas where students are being bused from, we'll know what seats are available for courtesy riders and then begin allocating those seats. The online registration that parents will submit to us, we will collate it and make our way through the pile of paper we're expecting. We hope to have information back to families whose children will be riding buses by mid-August. Because this is the first year that we're doing this, that's a little later than what we'd like. Next year, most following, the information will be back to parents much, much sooner than that. We're really hoping in May or June. We acknowledge there will be adjustments to make. As they are identified to us, we will work through each of them. Each year, busing will also undergo a high-level review to identify corrections that we need to make, and that will be an ongoing process. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Jen?
Communication to parents in the community. How will that information be gotten out there? Because we all know parents don't read newsletters. You know, some parents don't have access to the web and all that. So what mechanisms will you guys be using to ensure that all parents, those who really need the information, get the information? This is really important. They need to fill out the forms.
I expect information to go, it'll be on our website. I expect it to go in all the local papers, including, I think there's, I forget what it's called on the islands, there's another little
Grapevine or something.
grapevine. It'll also go home from the schools with the students to the parents. And use Civic Voice because
So the other thing is that we'll be expecting students who are currently riding our buses to take something home. It's to their advantage because they're not going to get on a bus in September unless they have a bus pass. It might make it. At some point in time, we think that the busing profile has been pretty high. We will use everything we can to get the message out, and then we're hoping that parents who, you know, between school newsletters, the website, newspapers, Center Voice, all those kinds of things, we'll do our very best, and we were hoping that parents will be looking for information. The students will be told, well, this is probably starting mid-June, that you need to make sure that you get yourself registered for a bus, and we'll probably hand something to them. Some of that will end up in their backpacks, and some of it will be left on the bus seat, but they'll understand that that stuff has to be filled out for them to get on a bus in September. So that's usually the best motivator for it to get home. Okay.
And the ones that are dropped because the child forgets it and parents don't see it for whatever reason, that's part of our going things that we will work through.
Yeah. Which is why the September 30th deadline for this year, because we know that there will be some who somehow have missed this entire conversation, and we're talking about students here for the most part, and they'll come to the realization when they go to get on their bus and they're asked for a bus pass and they go bus pass. So it'll take a little bit for us to confirm the actual dedicated riders that need to be on that bus, which is why September 30th is the date for us to identify what courtesy seats are available. There's a bit of growing pains, but once it's up and running, I've come from a district where we bus a very large number of students. When it's up and running, there's just this rhythm to it that gets everyone seems to know. Kids who have bus passes from one year to another are the same kids. Go figure, for 5 years in high school, so they get a car at least. And then, so you get to a place where there's, for the most part, just this rhythm of everyone knowing and registering appropriately, or having the right bus pass, or knowing where the bus stops are, how to use the website map, and that kind of thing. So it'll take a little while. But.
I just noted in your presentation, and at our last meeting, you know, we did ask that you really look at that Denman Lake French immersion, and I noticed that you are going to be able to get the kids.
Because of what's been taking place.
Yep.
That's one of the runs that we looked at quite hard.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my notes that we'll be able to identify courtesy riders later.
Yeah.
But because of what's taking place, we look at that one run, and there is room on the new routes for those Lake French immersion.
And your commitments to both
ways.
Oh, I want to thank you so much for doing that. I know you will. Oh, that is such great news. That's just great. The other question I had was about your comment that the walk limits come down for K-7. Lake Trail has this very peculiar situation where there really haven't been any buses going to Lake Trail, and yet there are grade 7s going there. And they were being left up they were being, the ones from out, they were being, you know, Marsden or wherever, they were being dropped at Arden and having to walk because we discontinued any buses stopping at Lake Trail because of those pesky vandals. So what's going to happen with
Wait, stop. Don't say things. They're wonderful. It's not true. It's not true.
It's not, but it seemed to be an issue. Anyway, so are there going to be, are grade 7s going to be on a bus route to Lake Trail then? Is that part of it? Yeah, that's the one that's kind of an anomaly that might have gone underground. And then the other thing is there's still the whole question about programs of choice that we as a group are going to have to deal with, get the research and really look at in the fall. But I just am so appreciative of your work at this point. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Fran?
I also think that we've got some really good solutions, that it was a process to get here, but I think it was a process worth going through, because I do think that for this stage, we're better off than we would have been if we wouldn't have had the continuing discussions over the last months.
Did I hear you saying that BC Transit was going to work with us to get the students not just to Isbell in the morning, but to return them back down the island in the afternoon? So that, my question is, of course, about catching ferries. So if we have courtesy riders on our buses who are coming from the islands to
Courtesy
Isbell.
riders on our buses will go on our buses. BC Transit, whatever they do with their routes is whatever they do with their routes. They have said they're looking at running the bus south. They have also said that they'd like us moving the Bell times, because then they can better schedule their buses, their school specials, to the high schools.
Okay, the question I raise, of course, is so that those kids who need to catch a ferry back to the islands can do so in a timely manner without having to, wait there for the 6 o'clock ferry, as was brought to our attention from somebody in the public.
Those with out catchment kids again. The late French immersion, I have accommodated because there's room on that bus. But if there's a lot of children from down there, we won't have all that on our buses if they're out catchment.
I just have a comment myself. I don't even know if this is some grammatically incorrect thing to say, but I'm not a person that believes in gratuitous thank yous at all. I feel that it's really important that when you say thank you, you really mean it. It's not just for show. And in this case, I am just so thrilled with the work that took place over almost a year here with respect to busing. I think it has been a huge undertaking to take the system that really wasn't functioning very well at all and to take it apart and to, I think you have listened to what a lot of the public has had to say with regards to this. I know the choice piece is outstanding, and I look forward to the survey that will take place in the fall to see if there's a discrete number of people that are interested in more busing for choice programs or not. But I think this has just been an amazing piece of work, probably mostly Chuck, and I think Len had a lot to do with it as well. And so thank you very much for all of your work on this. Do we need to pass this motion then?
And the PowerPoint, Madam Chair.
And the PowerPoint was amazing, but that was Alan
talking in public, but
influence.
thank you very much.
So do we have a motion here?
I would move that board direct staff to implement new bus routes, walk limits, and adjusted bell times for the 2011-2012 school year as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much. Look at that. 2 hours worth of business again. That's pretty good with a few minutes left for questions and answers from the public. Anybody have anything this evening? Come on, that's 2 meetings in a row. You guys haven't asked anything. Carly, have something?
That the number of children that we're currently dealing with, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 1 or 2 now that are being going to Isabel.
All those kids are going to, like, my daughter's the only one right now in grade 8, but there's a whole cohort right now that we can
So the ones that have to go to Isabel, then would carry on, they would be dropped at Bangor.
No, sorry, the ones that are going to college, now we just get to Isabel.
Are there any more going to college?
Yes,
There is.
yes.
There is.
So when they finish at Puntledge, they now need to go to their French. So when they finish in grade 7, they need to go to their French immersion high school, which is Isfeld. So what we need to know is what the numbers are and how, if there is a way to. We've managed to get the new starters in late French immersion, the elementary ones, to Ecole Puntledge Park. We need to determine is if there's a way to get the ones that are finishing up at Ecole Puntledge Park this year and those that have finished in the last 3 years. 2 years? Just one? Just one? If we can assist them in getting to Isfeld for that's where they're finishing their French immersion journey. So it's not a lot of students. I'm just trying to figure out, Alan, do you have any sense of how many that would be?
Well, there's
How many years of late French immersion have we had? 3?
In the district.
In the
We've got
district.
one group that went to grade 8 this year,
Yeah,
and, but they come from all over the district.
Yeah.
yeah.
And, I mean, the question that you're
No,
starting,
yeah, we'd have to open it up.
that
to
you open
everybody else.
is, what about the French immersion? Parents are going to say, what
From a
about
cold
French
run.
immersion?
Yeah.
We'd like to be bused.
I think there's 2 threads here. One is, can we somehow accommodate kids within the existing busing?
Yes.
And the separate thread, which we are going to assess in the fall, is can we open up our busing wider to include
French immersion.
choice programs, and do choice parents actually want that?
So Carl's question would be, is there any courtesy seats available for students from Buckley Bay to get to Isfeld? Right, that's the question right now. And we don't think so, because we thought those buses were pretty full.
They can
It would be to Banyan.
They go to Vanier.
Then they go to Vanier and then
Transit
transit to
Isfeld.
Isfeld.
I think on that one, the issue of getting Denman students to Isfeld, it was not the same as having to drive elementary kids to Puntledge. There are buses that go to Isfeld, which kids from the south end of our district, and you know, they use the CDRD transit to get there. And the parents who were having to go off island twice a day with vehicles to drive their children to Puntledge, it was specifically relating to the elementary program. There's no other way to do it. And so
And we're saying that
we
can
still know
accommodate
that
those kids to get them to
around
Vanier.
high school
Then
students
they get
there's
the bus.
issues, but it's not something that we're making the same priority effort as the Puntledge one.
Okay, well, thanks. It's 9 o'clock. A motion to adjourn.
So what's the score?
Second. All those in favor?
We're in overtime.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Game, Shannon, you never-
Carried.